Blackfacts.com presents Black History Heroes. Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass, original name Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey, was an African-American who became one of the most eminent human rights leaders of the 19th century. His oratorical and literary brilliance thrust him into the forefront of the U.S. abolition movement, and he became the first black citizen to hold high rank in the U.S. government. Douglass was born in 1818, though the month and day are uncertain. He later opted to celebrate his birthday on February 14th. Separated as an infant from his mother, who was a slave, he never knew his white father. Frederick lived with his grandmother on a Maryland plantation until he was 8 years old, when his owner sent him to Baltimore to live as a house servant with the family of Hugh Auld, whose wife defied state law by teaching the boy to read. Auld, however, declared the learning would make him unfit for slavery, and Frederick was forced to continue his education surreptitiously with the aid of schoolboys in the street. Upon the death of his master, he was returned to the plantation as a field hand at 16. Later he was hired out in Baltimore as a ship caulker. 5 years later, however, he fled to New York City and then to New Bedford, Massachusetts, where he worked as a laborer for 3 years, eluding slave hunters by changing his surname to Douglass. At a Nantucket, Massachusetts anti-slavery convention in 1841, Douglass was invited to describe his feelings and experiences under slavery. These extemporaneous remarks were so poignant and eloquent that he was unexpectedly catapulted into a new career as agent for the Massachusetts Anti-Slavery Society. From then on, despite heckling, mockery, insult, and violent personal attack, Douglass never flagged in his devotion to the abolitionist cause. To counter skeptics who doubted that such an articulate spokesman could ever have been a slave, Douglass felt impelled to write his autobiography in 1845, revised and complete in 1882 as Life and Times of Frederick Douglass. Douglass's account became a classic in American literature as well as a primary source about slavery from the bondman's viewpoint. To avoid recapture by his former owner, whose name and location he had given in the narrative, Douglass left on a 2-year speaking tour of Great Britain and Ireland. Abroad, Douglass helped to win many new friends for the abolition movement and to cement the bonds of humanitarian reform between the continents. Douglass returned with funds to purchase his freedom and also to start his own anti-slavery newspaper, the North Star, later Frederick Douglass's paper, which he published from 1847 to 1860 in Rochester, New York. The abolition leader William Lloyd Garrison disagreed with the need for a separate black-oriented press. Thus, after 1851, Douglass allied himself with the faction of the movement led by James G. Birney. He did not countenance violence, however, and specifically counseled against the raid on Harper's Ferry, Virginia, October 1859. During the Civil War, 1861-65, Douglass became a consultant to President Abraham Lincoln, advocating that former slaves be armed for the North and that the war be made a direct confrontation against slavery. Through our Reconstruction, 1865-77, he fought for full civil rights for freedmen and vigorously supported the women's rights movement. After Reconstruction, Douglass served as Assistant Secretary of the Santo Domingo Commission, 1871. And in the District of Columbia he was Marshal, 1877-81, and Recorder of Deeds, 1881-86. Finally, he was appointed U.S. Minister Land Consul General to Haiti, 1889-91. On February 29, 1895, Douglass attended a meeting of the National Council of Women in Washington, D.C. During that meeting, he was brought to the platform and received a standing ovation. Shortly after he returned home, Douglass died of a massive heart attack. He was 77. Learn more at blackfacts.com.